The iMore show today is brought to you by 1Month, and specifically 1Month HTML. Now, 1Month is a service that basically teaches you skills you need to know, especially if you want to be a web developer or include web developer type things on your resume. That includes stuff like HTML itself, but also things like CES. Basically everything that you need to know to be a coder. It is 30 minutes a day for 30 days. You'll build an actual website starting from day one, and you'll be welcomed into a community of 12,000 other students all learning online. So here's what I want you to go. I want you to go to onemonth.com/the iMore show. Again, it's for the 1Month HTML, 30 minutes a day for 30 days. You'll be able to code HTML and CSS all on your own. Enrollment is typically $99, but if you join now, you'll get a one-time discount of 25% off for joining. And as always, you'll be helping to support the iMore show. So it is July 24, 2014. I'm Rene Ritchie, and right now we're going to be talking about the Yosemite public beta. We're going to be talking about Apple's earnings, and we're going to be talking about, what are they called again? Oh yeah, backdoor access. This is the iMore show. Joining me, as always, the managing editor of iMore, Peter Cohen. How are you?
Good. Backdoor access sounds naughty.
Well, it's like that episode of Homer Simpson where he said, "I'm not into that backdoor shenanigans. Not that I'm not interested. Not that I'm not intrigued." Good old Homer. It was a totally wrong voice for Homer. He's more like, "Doe." Well, what can you do? So, Peter, how you doing? I already asked you that, didn't I?
Yes, you did. And the answer is fine. How are you today, Rene?
I was double-checking to make sure you were giving me a legitimate answer. I was going to compare your original testimony to the second testimony and see if you're perjuring yourself on the status of your own fineness.
I think that seems completely reasonable under the circumstances.
Yeah, I was telling you before the show started, I'm a little bit frazzled because we had a lot going on this week. We had, all the insanity surrounding the backdoor allegations. We had Apple earnings. We're also making some huge changes at iMore. You might even see them by the time that you are listening to this podcast if you go to the iMore homepage. So teaser right there. But it has all culminated in me not getting very much sleep for the last 4 days, or food, or any of the things that are supposed to keep us alive. So it's going to be a fun show, Peter.
So you're feeling a little punchy then, eh?
A little punchy, a little sleep drunk. I don't know what the proper term is. Drunks? I don't know.
I get it.
So let's start with the last thing and work our way backwards. Yosemite public beta hit today.
Yes, indeed. So Yosemite public beta is now available. If you signed up for access to the beta, which many thousands and thousands of people did, you may have gotten a notification from Apple announcing that you can download it. And download it you should, as long as you take some basic precautions, like making sure that your Mac is backed up and preferably not even using your primary Mac at all to test this, using a secondary Mac. But if you've only got one Mac, put it on an external hard drive maybe, or if worst comes to worst, I guess you can partition your hard drive and put it there, but really keep it away from your main workaday Mavericks volume, because you don't want bad things to happen to your data.
Now, Peter, I haven't had a chance to look at this yet because I was scrambling to get the show ready. But is Apple released Yosemite Developer Preview 4, I think, just a couple days ago? Is this the same build as that? Is this any different?
I understand from our own Richard Devine that the build numbers are actually different. I haven't had a chance to compare the public beta against the Developer Preview 4 that you and I both installed, but I do believe that there's a discrepancy in numbers.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd also heard rumors, and I'll have to check if this is true or not, that on iOS 8 beta there is a bug reporter app that's built into there, and saints preserve the bug sorters at Apple who are getting deluged with hundreds of thousands of people filling out bug reports for the very first time. But it'd be interesting to see if that sort of thing made it over there. I mean, Microsoft famously has had public betas for Windows for years, but this is Apple's first one, at least that I can recall. Well, I guess the very first OS X was a public beta, Kodiak, but since then at least.
Yeah, indeed. This is sort of new territory for Apple, so there still may be kinks to work out in the process. But, I think it's good that Apple is expanding the the user base of people in the beta to regular users. Even though I don't necessarily think it's a good idea for everybody to go out and install it unless you take some precautions and unless you go into it understanding that you're using beta software and the beta software may cause unanticipated issues. I think it's good that Apple's expanding the base because if there's one thing that we learned from the Mavericks release in late last year, it's that there were a lot of problems that didn't get shaken out of the tree until it got in a very large base of users' hands. So I'm sure that Apple is anxious not to repeat those mistakes and want to make sure that Yosemite is as solid as possible on day one.
Yeah, I mean, so that's really interesting to me. Because some people, and this happens, we've seen this for years when there were non-public betas, some people view them as, what's the right way to put it, as early access. Like they think that by putting on the beta software, they're getting basically the final product just months before everyone else is. They look at it as something that's cool, maybe as a status symbol, maybe, I'm not sure everyone really understands what it means to be beta in this sense.
No, I really don't think that people do, and I think that even if they have beta-tested applications or if they've used Steam to get early access to apps that are still in development, games that are still in development, they still may not understand the differentiation between that and the Yosemite beta. In that Yosemite is the core bedrock of your computer. It is the operating system. It is the platform upon which everything else works. And if stuff is broken in your operating system, the rest of your Mac is not going to work very well. And applications that you may depend on may work in ways that you don't expect or may not work at all. So beta testing an operating system is completely different from getting early access to an application through a developer program or beta testing an app. It's a completely different ball of twine. They really can't be compared.
Yeah, so I don't want to say anything about the current betas because I don't think it's classy to talk about betas. It's beta software for a reason. But previous years' betas, for example, I have had phones that no longer worked as phones. I have been unable to do basic functions. I have lost. I always put it on a secondary machine. I have an older machine that I can just install the stuff on, and I've lost things on that machine. It is very much Apple really means it when they say beta. So Peter, is there a sort of a person who you might recommend like this for the guy who's experienced, the guy or girl who's experienced at tech, who enjoys, like the Nick Arnott type person who likes nothing better than finding and filing report bugs to be helpful?
Sure, I think that those sort of people will be fine with the beta. I think that developers who are creating products that are dependent on new services in these operating system versions have to start using it now if they haven't already. I think IT people who are going to be investing a lot of time in deploying this stuff and maybe even training their users in how to use some of the new features in Yosemite have a vested interest to do it. And people who are just generally curious and have the facility and the resources at their disposal to manage the installation effectively, all those people can do it. Who I don't think should do it are people who are just looking for the latest and greatest thing, people who aren't going to know what to do if their computer starts acting weird, and people who are really going to be put out if their machine stops working altogether or doesn't work in a predictable way and ends up causing them a lot of problems. I work in a retail store on the weekends, and already we've had people coming in who have installed the developer preview releases of Yosemite, and their Macs are not working right, and they expect us to fix it. And, in at least one case, I handed the computer back and I said, sorry, you are on your own. This is a developer preview release for a reason. If you're unable to fix it or if you're unable to get it working effectively, you have no choice but to reformat your hard drive and install Mavericks and try again. And, hopefully that you had a backup. And in this particular case, they did have a backup. But, don't expect to be able to walk into your local Apple retailer or your local Apple retail store and go to the Genius Bar and say, yeah, I installed this public beta and it sucks and I want you to fix it. That's not the way that it works. This isn't release software. This is beta software. That means, by definition, it's not release software.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress that enough. When you install a beta, the developer betas, I haven't had a chance to read the public beta licensing agreement yet. But when you install the developer beta, you forfeit, for example, the right to go to Apple Retail and go to Apple Geniuses. They can't service you. You are now on the developer track. You can deal with developer technical support, but I guarantee you they have better things to do than to help you recover from a beta you should not have been installing to begin with. And I don't want to belabor this point, but I want to make sure that nobody installs this by accident and loses something. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're installing it for new features, you'll get some of the new features with the beta preview. You will be able to test that kind of stuff out. But for example, things like continuity, the stuff where you move between iOS and OS X, that's going to require betas on both sides, and those betas are not fully functional yet. You will get the new Spotlight. You will get things like some of the plugins, Apple's plugins, for example, markup in Mail and other apps will be working, but developers are not allowed to release new apps yet, so there will be no new apps that use those new features, including no new apps that use the plugin system. The new messages will be there. I don't know if iCloud Drive is enabled in the public beta or not. I know that it is enabled in the developer beta, but Apple has at least once wiped data there, and they reserve the right to do that throughout the development process.
That's right. So it's an ever-changing landscape, and you need to be very careful, and you need to be patient, quite frankly.
So, Peter, if you do get the Yosemite public beta, there are some interesting things. I do like the new messaging quite a bit. The thing I like especially about it is the group messaging, because I think we've all been there where suddenly 2 or 3 people are in a message and it no longer has anything to do with you, and there's no way for you to leave it. Your phone is either beeping or buzzing or popping up all over the place. It is very really, especially for somebody like me, the nightmare scenario. It's like your phone has been taken over by name your favorite Twilight Zone or Doctor Who alien, and you just can't have it back. And one of the things that OS X, like iOS, fixes is that you can go in, you can not only edit these group conversations and title them, but you can leave them at your discretion, and you can also put them on Do Not Disturb. It's glorious.
It is. It's a nice feature, and it is, in my opinion, long overdue.
Yeah, the other things, I'm not too certain about the other. So also, if you share pictures and stuff, now you get those pictures persist. Like previously, you could see one picture, but now and slide through them. But now, when you go to the group conversation, all the pictures and videos are there in a display reminiscent of how photo stream sharing used to work. But also, if you want to, you can do location sharing, Find My Friends sort of style, right from the messages. And it's like the Messages app is becoming a mini social hub.
Yeah, the Messages app and Notification Center, I think, are both key to social interaction going forward, definitely.
Is that so? I have mixed feelings about this because part of me liked the fact that everything was sort of in its own little app garden. If I wanted sharing, I knew to go. Like if I wanted to know where my friends were, I knew to go there. If I wanted to go to my pictures, this in some ways it's super convenient, but in some ways it feels like I have to. There's more small universes to manage.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm still kind of playing around with it and trying to figure out how it works into my use case specifically. So I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on what the right thing to do is. But it's definitely a different approach.
Have you played with markup yet?
Yes, markup is very cool. What's really interesting about markup is that markup is not just limited to the Mail application. In fact, any application that uses Apple's system-level text editing and image handling capabilities can use markup as well. And we're going to see more of this sort of stuff because markup is an extension for all intents and purposes. It's a new mini application that we're going to be able to sort of incorporate into our workflow. In some ways, and this goes back a long, long time, back to the classic Mac OS days, markup and the philosophy behind how markup works is sort of similar to another experiment that Apple tried many years ago called OpenDoc.
Yes.
Where you would have these sort of mini applications that you would be able to cobble together different features and functionality to do these sorts of things. OS X has it much more sophisticated. Yosemite has it much more sophisticated than OpenDoc ever could have dreamed of. But I did get sort of an echo of OpenDoc when I was playing with the stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's an excellent point on On MacBreak on Tuesday, we had a question from Alex Lindsay's question engine about what we were most looking forward to in Yosemite. And Alex and Andy did a great job of talking about continuity and how nice it's going to be to have that seamless workflow. And I think that's fantastic. But the extension stuff, I think because it's so important to iOS, that it's getting overlooked on OS X. And I'm really excited about it there too, because you get the sharing extension. So, for example, Apple doesn't have to make a partnership with Pinterest or Instagram or whoever your favorite social network is. They can just build their own sharing extension, and it goes right into the same share sheet. The action extensions, like Markup is an action extension, so any app that uses action extensions can use Markup, basically free of charge. But there's going to be photo extensions too, so maybe the new Photos app, and Peter's done a lot of good writing about this, it's not going to have all the features of Aperture. But really smart developers, I mean, maybe even Google, they've got the Nick team, can write plugins that'll go right into Photos, and you'll be able to do, great photo effects, filters, transformations like that. It's making, exactly like the name on the tin, Peter, it's making OS X more extensible.
That's right. And, I don't think that this is as big a deal for OS X as it is for iOS, because iOS has always been this closed environment where, people have had to make these arrangements with Apple in order to add this sort of support to these outbound services and this outbound functionality. Whereas, OS X is fundamentally open. So, depending on how you've got your security settings, obviously, you've had a lot more ability to connect into outbound services and support for different applications. So I don't think that extensions in OS X are necessarily as revolutionary as they are in iOS 8. But having said that, anything that improves workflow productivity is a good thing. And where something like Markup, we've seen Markup used in the WWDC note, and we saw it used kind of trivially in taking a photograph and putting a magnifying loop on part of it so you could see part of the image close up, and adding a dialogue bubble so you could make a joke, and maybe putting in some arrows that they get cleaned up by Markup so you can draw the viewer's attention to what you're looking at. That's all cute stuff, but there's some really powerful stuff going on behind the scenes here. From my perspective, anything that improves my productivity, anything that keeps me working on the document or the content that I am working on, and that doesn't have to take me out of that content and take me to an app where there's another interface I've got to manipulate to do what I need to do, I think that's a good thing, and I think that that's a really positive thing for Mac users.
I agree with that completely. I think in those cases, the ones that we talked about now, that's absolutely the case. I'm not sure if widgets are going to be different because they're going to live in the Today view and Notification Center. And granted, you're not going to Dashboard anymore, but you're still going to a secondary location. You can pull it up from anywhere, but you could do that with Dashboard already. So I'm not sure if, for example, having Calculator in Notification Center is going to mean anything more to me than having it in Dashboard.
Yeah, and in fairness, a lot of people don't use Dashboard anymore. I do just sort of reflexively go to Dashboard to do things like currency conversions or even simple calculations. Sometimes I even use the dictionary and thesaurus in Dashboard instead of actually doing it inline in whatever I'm doing. And that's just kind of a reflexive, maybe I'm just not as... what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe I'm just not as flexible as I should be with new technology, but I know that some people use Dashboard for all sorts of different things. I think that the Today view and widgets in the Today view are going to take people out of that experience and put them there. And let's face it, the Notification Center is easier for most people to see and to use than Dashboard as well, because Dashboard takes over your screen entirely. Mm-hmm. It's a separate space in Mavericks altogether. Maybe it's a good thing. Having said that, the nice thing about widgets is that they're completely customizable, so you can have whatever content you want in there. If you do, if you do a lot of calculations, you can have your calculator in there. If you don't, you can shut it off and you can put on other things. You can have, you'll be able to put on ESPN sports information, for example, stuff like that. Whatever is of particular interest and use to you, is what you'll be able to access from that. So that's another element to go along with what I was saying before about markup, where whatever improves your workflow, whatever improves your ability to get the information that you need in order to do your work, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you hit the nail on the head too when you were talking about easier access, and I think that's what it is, because OS X has had plugin architectures of various kinds, services and whatnot for years, and they've just never become mainstream technologies. And I think it's not that extensibility is doing something any revolutionary in OS X, but I think it's putting it in a much more accessible place. I think Share Sheet is where people go more often. Notification Center probably is more accessible than Dashboard was. Putting stuff in the Photos app instead of having to go through several different editor apps just to work on one picture. I think that ease of workflow is what's going to make extensibility an overall win for everybody.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to tell you about one of our sponsors, and that is lynda.com. Lynda.com helps you learn and keep up to date with your software, pick up brand new skills, or explore new hobbies with their easy-to-follow video tutorials. Whether you want to learn how to make the most out of your Apple devices and apps, edit video footage using Final Cut Pro 10, or build an iOS app, Lynda.com offers thousands of video courses on a variety of topics. And when I say thousands, I mean literally thousands, 2,400 courses, over that much, taught by industry experts, and they are adding more and more all the time. Lynda.com is really cool because there is nothing better than learning new skills, and I'll be frank, I'm not a fan of traditional education. I don't like going to school. I don't like being put into course loads with things that I do and don't like. Lynda.com is a la carte. You go in there, you learn exactly what you want. No one is telling you what to do. They are helping you get it done. I've been doing the Logic Pro stuff, not as fast as I thought I could do it, but I am still doing it. I've been looking at the Final Cut Pro stuff. There is fantastic stuff. They have stuff on Mavericks. I am sure day and date they will have stuff on using OS X Yosemite. And it is all presented both on the Mac. You can get iOS apps as well. It is very easy to use. Peter, I know that you're a fan of lynda.com as well.
Absolutely. Have used them for years.
So this is what I want you to do. I want you to try them out, and we have worked out a special offer with lynda.com to provide you with the entire library free for 7 days. All you have to do is visit lynda.com/iMore and start your 7-day trial. You can improve your skills. I mean, there's iOS development stuff. There's almost everything that you can think of. You can learn getting things done, 1Password fundamentals, advanced Google AdWords tips and tricks, mobile marketing fundamentals, managing your mobile photos. So much stuff. Creative Cloud if you're on the Adobe side of things. Microsoft Office. So I could actually figure out how to open up the talking points for this ad. I mean, it is literally without end. So go to lynda.com, start your free 7-day trial. That's lynda.com/iMore. Peter, Apple had some earnings this week.
Yes, they did. Apple made money.
You know how I know?
How?
I heard a bunch of people go, doomed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that, and you didn't get much sleep that day either.
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, Apple announced, here, I'll give you the headline, first of all, 35.3 million iPhones. Now, this is Apple, I think this is Apple's weakest quarter. If not, it's one of them, because there is no new product launches in this quarter. It is not the holiday quarter, and they still sold 35.3 million iPhones, Peter.
Yeah, indeed. It was a number that Apple was very happy with, especially because, as they put it, they believe that rumors about new iPhones later this year are hurting potential sales. That people are not buying iPhones with the expectation that new iPhones are coming. I think it's kind of silly for Apple to lay this or lay rumors to blame for this, though, because the fact is they've been on an annual upgrade path for iPhones for years now, an annual refresh path. So it's not like they're not doing anything that they haven't trained us to do since 2007. Having said that, 35.3 million iPhones, really good number. iPads, they sold 13.3 million. That was actually below expectations, and even a little bit lower than Apple's guidance as well. So, or low in Apple's guidance, right? Apple, I forget what Apple said that they were going to do for that. But the bottom line is the tablet market is soft. We all knew it's soft. Quite frankly, it's better than I expected. But we'll see. And then the bright spot.
Before you go on to the bright spot, because I know what you're going to say. I want to give you a chance to say it, but I want to just take that iPad stuff apart for a second. So,
sure.
the the market being soft is something that I think is really interesting. Like there is still obviously a market for tablets. Tim Cook said he's incredibly bullish. Apple still believes that tablets are going to overcome PCs eventually in the marketplace, but they're so new. It's such a new product category, and it had such an extreme hockey stick. Like it was, as far as I recall, Apple's fastest growing product. It was faster growing than the iPhone. Even it just rocketed to the top. And I think that when I've made this analogy before, but if you and I are both on the same highway, and I'm in a Lada and you're in a Lamborghini, even if the speed limit is 50, you're going to get there so much faster than I am. But once we get to 50, that acceleration tapers off. It becomes flat. And the other thing is, I'm not sure any of us sort of figured out what the tablet upgrade cycle is. Like we know what the traditional MacBook maybe or computer upgrade cycle is. We know what the phone cycle is, but I think maybe people are keeping their tablets longer than phones, and that was a surprise to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look at it this way. Consumers are spending more than twice as much on their iPads as they are on average on their phones. If they're in North America and they're getting them subsidized, right? People don't typically spend more than $100, $200 to get a new phone, even a new iPhone, through their carriers. So they're spending $500 or more to get an iPad. It makes sense that they're going to want the iPad to have a longer tail than the iPhone, perhaps. And also, people's use case for iPads is very different than phones. Phones you drop in your pocket, you bring them with you everywhere. The phone never leaves your side. You never leave the house without the phone. You never get in your car without your phone. Whatever. iPads are a little bit more of incidental use. You may take it with you, sure, the same way that you might have taken a laptop a few years ago, but it's not something that you use as much as you use a phone. So I think fundamentally the upgrade cycle is different for the iPad. And Apple's done as good a job as it can of making sure that people get as much life out of their iPad as possible. When iOS 8 debuts this fall, it is going to work on iPad 2s, but not completely. Some features are going to be missing for iPad 2 users that people who have iPad Airs are not going to have any problems with whatsoever. So, now it's getting to the point where features are starting to drop off because the hardware just can't handle all the features that the operating system is capable of doing anymore.
That's one of those things where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, because if they didn't provide backwards support for an iPad 2, they would be accused of, sabotaging it to try to force somebody to buy a new iPad. By providing partial features, some people will say, oh, they're withholding that deliberately, so I buy a new iPad. But if they didn't provide it at all, they're saying, oh, Apple's withholding the update, so I'm forced to buy a new iPad.
Right, exactly. So somebody's always going to find something to complain about. That much is true. But, we'll see what happens. So, 13.3 million iPads is still a fair number. It met their expectations, met Apple's expectations on the low end. It just didn't meet analysts. So that's where Wall Street kind of dinged them a little bit. The other thing that Tim Cook said during the earnings call was he kind of underscored this great big deal that Apple just announced with IBM.
Yes.
Now, iPads are very popular in enterprise. Corporations have been deploying them for quite some time. Education, too. Education is a huge user. But there are entire industries that are standardized on the iPad. Airlines, for example, routinely outfit their pilots and their flight crews with iPads instead of the big boxes of manuals that they used to give them. If things went wrong in the air and they needed to know what to do, they just look at their iPads instead. That's a tremendous change for that industry. Healthcare is finding more uses for them, and so on. So there are vertical markets that Apple can exploit to continue to grow iPad sales growth. The other interesting thing is that iPad sales are booming in some emerging markets, like China, for example. They're outpacing what the West is doing. So, we're seeing this peak in United States and Europe, but the iPads. Sorry.
So I was gonna say there was the enterprise thing was particularly interesting to me because in light of the IBM deal, Tim Cook said that they've said before they have 98% penetration in enterprise, but that's breadth, not depth. Mm-hmm. Even if they have tens of thousands, it's maybe in one group or it's in one vertical or in one segment or something. And Cook believes there's a huge opportunity. He said that they have about 20% depth of penetration for iPads, where traditional laptops have about 60%. And he said if through IBM they could drive that penetration to 60%, it would shake the walls of the place.
Shake the walls is the euphemism that he used, literally. And as I said, iPad sales are also growing in developing markets. China is up 51%. India is up 41%. The Middle East is up 64%. So these are all big growth markets for Apple, places where there are consumers with money who want Apple products. So, it's good news for Apple on the iPad side.
And Tim Cook said, interestingly, it was before this, it was during the IBM press tour that he did, that he does 80% of his work on the iPad. Now, I still use my MacBook for most of my work, partly because it's muscle memory to me now. I write, I write 2 to 3, maybe sometimes even 4,000 words a day, and I could get a keyboard for my iPad, but I'm also using Photoshop, I'm using Final Cut Pro, using GarageBand and Logic, and it just feels to me like I need a truck to get that work done. I'm towing me some trailer in this parts, but I use my iPad. I use my phone whenever I'm out and about, so my iPad for me is still a relaxation device. It's what I read before I go to bed. It's what I use when I'm watching TV. It's sort of a secondary device for me, but it does intrigue me that Cook can use it so much.
Yeah, and I don't know if that goes against the grain of how others are using it. My use case is very much like yours. I use it to relax. I use it to watch videos occasionally. I use it to read certain forms of entertainment, like books, magazines, electronic magazines, and so on. And I use it to play games. It's become really my primary gaming device, actually, my iPad. So, there's something to be said for that. And I think that your use case and my use case are probably a lot more consistent with a lot of other people than either using it as a heavy device all the time for everything or, something else entirely. I'm not sure what. But clearly they are also getting used as specialty devices in some vertical markets, in retail, in enterprise, in medicine, and education as well. They're parts of some really big deals that Apple is doing in education, where Apple may do a deal with a school district to outfit all of their high school kids with MacBook Airs, for example, but then all the K through 8th graders will get iPads. So we're seeing their use in primary education. We're seeing their use in schools in early years. And in many cases, schools are doing this to get rid of textbooks. They're doing it so they can give the kids an iPad at the beginning of the year, and that means that they don't have to laden them down with 20, 40 pounds of textbooks every year. And I have to say, as the parent of 3 children, one of which has already graduated high school, one which will graduate this coming year, and one which is just starting high school this year. I really wish that my kids had been a little bit later to the game with this, because I've seen their backpacks when they bring home homework, and I feel bad for them because they have to carry so much more course material now than we did when we were kids. It's ridiculous.
What's interesting is, the kids, but my mom, for example, the iPad is her primary computer. It is the one that she uses 90% of the time, maybe even more than that. And it's for email on the web and watching videos, and she makes cards for people and all sorts of things. And for her, it's the best primary computer she's ever owned. But in the sorry, go ahead, Peter.
And you do see that a lot, especially with older customers. Not to say that your mom is old.
She's older than me, Peter.
But yeah, exactly. But some Apple customers who have reached a certain age need to replace a computer. In many cases, they need to replace a PC computer. A computer running Windows XP, for example, or Windows 7. They've seen Windows 8, and they just don't want it. They don't want to deal with it. It's not something that they're interested in learning how to use. And they want to replace it with something else entirely. And for those users, for those customers for whom the truck, as you put it, is not really the right answer, an iPad is a terrific primary device. It lets them surf the web. It lets them go shopping online. It lets them access email. It lets them even do chat if they want to do chat, Skype with friends and relatives who are far away. They can load up apps. They can play games, whether it's Solitaire or Angry Birds or whatever they want. They can do all those things. They can pay bills online. They can do all the same things that they were doing on their computer on their iPad. For a lot of different reasons, it doesn't make sense to me as a primary device, and that's mainly because, like you, Rene, I depend so heavily on a keyboard and a screen and the ability to move seamlessly between applications. Things that you still can't do.
Drag and drop.
Right, exactly. Drag and drop. Things that you still can't do quite as elegantly in iOS or, for that matter, any touch-based interface.
But to the
But
other point, though, my mom is still using an iPad too. I even gave her an iPad 3, and now she just uses both, and she doesn't notice a difference. She might upgrade this year, but the iPad 2 worked for her for many years.
so between the two of them, she's got an iPad 5.
Well, she actually uses one till the battery's worn down, then switches and uses the other one while it's charging.
Wow, that's kind of hardcore, actually. Damn, that's pretty good.
Go, Mom.
Yeah.
So, Peter, I interrupted you previously. You had a moment to shine in the
Woo!
earnings report.
Yes, indeed. I was very happy to read about Apple's Mac sales. Apple's Mac sales are up 4.4 million, a new June quarterly record for them, actually. For the past 8 years, except for one quarter, Apple has sold more Macs than ever. It has outpaced the PC industry. PC industry is in decline. It sort of waffles between abysmal and horrible, and it is contracting. But the Mac business is growing. It grows month to month to month. So it's very exciting to see. I was very, very happy to hear that. And the interesting thing is that Apple attributed it. In the past, Apple has been very happy to accept plaudits for improving Mac sales, but even now, Mac sales are still fractional when you compare them to its iPhone and iPad sales, so it doesn't really demand a lot of spotlight. But Apple did put the spotlight on it in this earnings call, and they said, in particular, one of the strong features of the Mac library right now, or the Mac ecosystem, is the MacBook Air. Now, surely it's not coincidental that at the beginning of this quarter, Apple refreshed the MacBook Air just slightly. They upgraded the processor speed by 100 megahertz. They popped a 1.4 gigahertz machine or Intel Haswell chip in place of the 1.3 gigahertz Intel Haswell chip that was in the MacBook Airs. But they also drop the price $100. Now, this means that you can pick up an 11-inch for $899. You can get the 13-inch MacBook Air, which is incredibly popular, for $999, and that gets it under $1,000. And if you're buying in bulk, you can get it for well less than that. So this is driving a lot of success for the MacBook Air. This particular quarter, Apple was able to seal a couple of big deals, institutional deals, where they're selling it to school systems for use with kids. Like I was saying before, in one particular case, they did it so all the kids and teachers got MacBooks in the high school, and all the teachers got MacBook Airs in grade schools, but then all the kids in grades in the lower grades got iPads. That's a huge win for Apple on the institutional sales side. And there were a couple of stories like that came out of Apple this quarter. So that's big news as well. And it also gave Tim Cook an opportunity during his preamble in the conference call with analysts to talk a little bit about what's coming later this year with Yosemite and iOS 8. Rene, you were talking about continuity before, and continuity figures very big into Apple's plans going forward, because for the first time, somebody who's using an iPhone is going to be able to make and take calls from their Macintosh as well. And within the scheme of things, this may not impress a lot of people, but it's something that I just cannot wait to be able to make work on my system, because that's huge. That means that I don't have to keep track of my phone. I don't have to keep it on me all the time. I can keep it plugged in and charging someplace and just use it when I have to. That's going to be really exciting stuff to see.
Yeah, we had the name. Let me see if I can pull it up again. We had a question just about that would fit in well here, and it was from David Tarrin, who was asking, he's traveling and he wanted to know if he could use continuity on his Mac to send free messages while he's traveling. And unfortunately, if you're using iMessage, of course, but if you're using the SMS, MMS part of continuity, your phone is the transit point. Apple is packaging stuff up on your Mac, sending it to your phone, using your phone to relay it to the network. So if it's not on the cellular network, that message is not going. Now, when you come back, or when that phone does get back on the network, it'll sync whatever messages you did send. But this is not free SMS messages for everybody. The free thing, or free as in data thing, is iMessage. You still have to have your SMS plan, and you're using your SMS plan. The other thing, though, Peter, that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if it's coincidental or not, but we had such spectacular Mac results, and Apple this week aired a brand new Mac commercial for the first time since 2012, at least I can remember.
Indeed, yeah. The what's the slogan? It's the laptop that people will love.
Yeah, and
the laptop that people love.
Yeah, it's called stickers, and they're well used laptops. They're not all bright and shiny laptops, but they have stickers all over them. And I don't recall Apple ever using, they've had a couple cases, primarily their own cases, or some fitness related cases in their iOS device ads. But you had DC superheroes, Disney stalwarts, fairy tale things. You had the six colored Apple logo as part of a Space Invaders scene. I mean, this was an interesting ad.
It's a very cool ad. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, though. This is how people use their MacBooks. You see this all the time wherever you go. People love to put stickers on their MacBooks. People love to put these decals on the back of them that do something to accentuate or draw attention to the glowing logo that's at the center of the MacBook back. So this ad is specifically talking about the MacBook Air. It's clearly trying to push the MacBook Air up, sort of bubble it up to the top of public consciousness going into the fall. As students are buying laptops for school, for example, parents are buying laptops for their kids. Kids are going to be getting interested in getting a laptop for Christmas. It's trying to spur consumer awareness of the MacBook Air. You go to a library, you go to a school, you go to anywhere, or you go to Starbucks, you go to anywhere that that you're going to see Apple laptops in use, and you're going to see people with stickers, these stickers all over their MacBook Airs, their MacBook Pros, their old MacBooks, whatever. You can buy them on Etsy, so I think that Apple is kind of pushing people to go check out the sticker collections on Etsy so they can find one that suits them perfectly. But it's a really cute ad, and it does demonstrate that people really love their MacBook Airs. They love to customize them, personalize them, and make them part of their lives.
Yeah, there was some new rumors this week. Once again, we've talked about the 12-inch Retina MacBook Air, or whatever Apple calls it, and I mentioned that as far as I knew, it was Broadwell-based, and Broadwell has been pushed back, which means this MacBook Air gets a lot more time to shine. I mean, if there are new products around, if WWDC has had as is traditional, introduced, like the Retina MacBook Pro was introduced there, if they'd used it as another platform, it may not be getting this attention. It may be cheap enough that it would get it anyway. But there's rumors of 4K Macs again, 4K displays, and it's still interesting to me that even with all this technology, with these high-density displays and these monster processors, that I don't want to call a MacBook Air low-end because it's not, but it's entry-level, and that is the shoulders upon which I think a lot of the Mac results were born this quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how the rumors shake out. Intel early this week introduced a new Haswell microprocessor that's just another iteration. It's a little bit of a spec bump compared to the chips that have been available for a few months now that Apple is using in its other systems. And sources tell me that channel inventory for MacBook Pro with Retina display is getting a little tight. So that could indicate that Apple is going to refresh the MacBook Pro with Retina display sooner rather than later. Broadwell is definitely not coming until 2015. It is definitely not coming in quantity until 2015. Apple may get its hands on it sooner, so we may see some stuff, happening later this year. But it's kind of a transitionary time right now for the processors that power Mac. So Apple is trying to do its best to keep the spotlight on the MacBook Air, keep people interested in it, keep talking about it, and make sure that people know it's there so they'll get into the stores and buy them.
All right, so sort of the last topic I want to discuss with you was earlier this weekend. I think his name is pronounced Jadinsky. I apologize if it's not. I really am not sure. His first name is Jonathan. I'm going to use that. I don't mean to be familiar, but it's just much easier to pronounce for me. So he was a jailbreaker. He was responsible for some of the jailbreaks leading up till iOS 4. He then became a forensics expert. He consulted with law enforcement agencies. He created forensic tools for law enforcement agencies. He did a paper back in January about what he called backdoors, or potential backdoors at least, inside iOS. And he recently gave a talk at the HopeX conference, and the slides to that talk he put up online. And he, in his own words, write a paper, no one listens, make a slideshow, rule the world. And everybody saw that. And unfortunately, the language in the slides, I think, was much more inflammatory, or at least attention-getting, than the language in the paper. And I don't think many journalists actually went and read the paper because it cost $30 online. but that's the job, fellas. So reports went up immediately. Apple makes NSA backdoor. Jonathan put up a blog post saying, please don't panic, please journalists, read what I wrote, don't do things. I'm not saying it's the NSA. He did a lot of things to his credit to diffuse the tension in the situation, but attention, people want attention. So we had a lot of articles. I looked into it. Nick Arnott, our security editor, looked into it. Apple got back to us on it. They gave us a comment on it. They also put up a knowledge base article about it. It boils down to a couple things. Primarily, I don't want to call it sloppiness, but there are definitely data leaks, but there's also a tension between security and convenience. And I use the example of the lock screen. For example, you don't have to have a password. It makes your iPhone immediately accessible to you, but it means anyone else picking it up can get into it as well. If you put a passcode or use Touch ID, that's better, but those are more easily brute forced or forced in another way than using a pseudo-random password. But a password is a pain in the ass to put in. So it depends what you like or what you don't like. You can have Control Center on your lock screen so you can turn on a flashlight very quickly, but also there's airplane mode there, so someone who grabs your phone could take it off the network. You can have Notification Center that shows you your messages, but it means if someone picks up your phone, they can see your messages. All of these are trade-offs. Now, the core of this report is something called pairing records. So, Peter, what basically happens with this is, and this is a legacy of iTunes being a music management program for iPods. You connect your iPhone to iTunes, and it creates a pairing record. Since iOS 7, you are asked, do you want to trust this device? The pairing is not automatic. But if you hit that, it saves that. It makes a record of that pairing, and you never get asked that again. And what's happening with this exploit is that if someone gets physical access to your laptop, they can copy that pairing record. So if I steal Peter's laptop, I can steal that record, and then I can if I steal Peter's phone after that, or if I'm law enforcement and I confiscate it, I can use that pairing record to get into his phone. And once I'm in there, I can use services that Apple has in there. He calls them undocumented, but iOS is a closed proprietary operating system. Nothing is documented. Unless it's made for customers or developers, it's not documented. That's just the way it is. So there are services that run there, including packet sniffers, which are not limited to developers. But again, if I've broken into your phone, I could turn them on from the developer thing anyway. I mean, a lot of this becomes moot once I have physical access. There's also something, perhaps the most worrying thing, is file relays, which basically blurt out data, including messages and photos and stuff. Apple says they're for diagnostics, but they include a ton of information that aren't needed for diagnostics, and that might just be that they exposed way too much because they never thought anyone would look at it, and it was just easier to do it that way, or it just could be bad programming or whatever. But stuff like that absolutely has to get fixed. The pairing stuff absolutely has to get fixed. The one thing I don't understand as well, Peter, is this mobile device management stuff. Now, apparently there's something in there that, and this is all new to Apple, and part of it might be due to the IBM stuff, but let's say your employee dies or he gets fired or gets put under investigation, they have tools that let you remotely take control back of their phone, and you could do things like force pairing and things like that. And I don't know if some of this stuff, again, is just because it's new and Apple's not an expert at enterprise and it'll get fixed over time or not.
I have no idea myself, so it's anybody's guess right now, I think.
Did you follow any of this? I mean, when you first saw the reports, did it make you against his advice? Did it make you want to panic?
Well, that's just it. I took his advice. I read what was reported on, and then I read his follow-up to it, and it seemed like he wasn't necessarily backtracking, but he was carefully coaching what he was saying with the perspective of how security systems work and what Apple's actual obligations are here, and it seemed to be a little more balanced than what was originally reported, which is par for course. Tech journalists are just like any other kind of journalists. If it bleeds, it leads. If there is a hysterical position to take here that's going to panic readers, well, that's going to drive page views, so that's what I'm going to write about,
I find it's really unfortunate with security because this is something that really truly does scare people. Like if my family is calling me because they see NSA backdoor, and he put in his thing, I'm not saying Apple put an NSA backdoor in this, but that was still, in almost every article that I read on it. I think that's when it's no longer reporting. There's sort of an agency that's taken on there. So it becomes entertainment disguised in a way that's overly digestible.
Yeah, exactly. Disguised in a way that's overly digestible. You know, we focus too much now on trying to easily digest things instead of actually trying to instead of trying to comprehensively understand things, and that's where we get into problems. And as you point out, Rene, you know, Apple followed up with this, and they tried to explain, at least in part, what's going on here. So, you know, it's interesting.
Steve Gibson on Security Now this week starts at around the 1 hour 10-minute mark, gives a really good explanation of it. He was not surprised or overly concerned by it. That is one point of view. It is legitimate to be surprised and concerned, though. I mean, privacy is a very, very important thing, and I hope that Apple does do things. For example, I hope they give us. I would love for iTunes Desktop, Peter, to have a way for me to see the pairing records and to automatically expire them if I haven't paired the device for a long time. I don't mind hitting that trust button again, you know, once every couple months or so, but also let me delete them from not using that device anymore.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would also like it if Apple doesn't really need all the information diagnostics. I understand they're hidden. I understand they're under the covers. I understand they're not. Apple. It might be obscurity, security through obscurity, but if they don't need that stuff, just don't generate it. Don't have it in there because then nobody can take it. And the point isn't that they're keeping it, but the point is that it is not as encrypted as other means. And Jonathan says this as well. He says, like, for typical attacks, the iOS 7 made things much harder. It stopped spyware, stopped a bunch of other stuff. Apple's doing a very good job at stopping traditional hacking. But the stuff that you can get to with these pairing records and that you can get to with these services gets around all of that encryption, and that I think absolutely has to change. And I think it's great that Apple put up the knowledge base. They describe some of these services. I hope they follow up. I hope in iOS 8 or 8.1, if it's too late for 8 already, that we see those security records and say, this has been changed, this has been changed, this has been locked down. And I want to echo Steve saying that I'm really happy that Jonathan did all this. I think it is not open source. Open source is no cure. People say if it was open source, it wouldn't happen. Bullshit, because Heartbleed was open source. GoToFail, I believe, was open source. There is so much open source stuff. Nobody is looking at it all. We're
not laughing with you. We're laughing at you.
Yeah,
open source is not the cure to everything.
People have to pay attention to this stuff. That is the cure for everything. I'm super glad he is doing it. I hope he keeps doing it. I think it's incredibly important as someone who uses iOS. I cannot thank him enough for doing it. And I hope Apple responds and makes iOS even more secure, because that's their job. At the end of the day, their job is to best balance convenience and security for the most users most of the time. And I think I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because they've done a very good job so far. Their types of businesses are aligned with what I want. They have a policy on their site that shows what they will and will not do for law enforcement. So I will give them that benefit of the doubt. I do kind of believe, Peter, the only sane response in a crazy modern world is not to trust anybody ever.
Yeah, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not really out to get you, right?
Yeah, so I have that feeling, but I will give out the benefit of the doubt, but I want to be able to be reassured that they are fixing this, and I want to see that entry in their next set of updates.
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
So a couple quick app updates I wanted to mention. Fantastical has hit 2.1. It gives you the ability to snooze, which I'm not sure is a good thing given the lack of sleep I've been getting.
Oh boy, yeah, Fantastical is definitely one of our favorites around the office. Terrific replacement calendar app that is very fast and very easy to use.
Simon is terribly excited because Modern Combat 5 is here.
Yeah, Gameloft takes a lot of guff from people who are in the game market for doing shameless rip-offs of other people's game ideas. And Modern Combat 5 is, without question, a Call of Duty Modern Combat-style clone. Having said that, there's something to be said for being the best of the clone makers, and Gameloft definitely is one of those. So a lot of stuff to enjoy here. A fair price that you pay for the game. You get a lot of gameplay for what you're charged. And
Giant Space Cat. Sorry, they finally. I don't mean finally in the finally sense, but I know how much work they've put into this. Have released Revolution 60, which is their take on an iOS action game.
Yeah, absolutely. Revolution 60 is a really unique game. It plays uniquely. It looks unique. It's from some very cool developers. Please check it out.
And I don't know if I mentioned it last week or not, but Overcast, Marco Arment's terrific podcast player for iOS, has been released, and Hours, which is Tapity's really awesome. I don't know what the proper word for it is, but if Peter were billing me in 6-minute intervals for this podcast, Hours would be a great way for him to keep track of that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Be glad that you don't.
I think that's all the app highlights. At least, am I missing anything obvious, Peter?
Let's see.
I think that's it.
We report on so many app updates from day to day. There's always something new that's coming out. So nothing that really jumps off the page at me that we've got to talk about right now, though.
All right, so I'm going to put a pin in this podcast. I am going to say that it has been done. I am just going to remind everybody that our friends at the Midroll, who are handling the sponsorships for us, are running a survey. It takes no more than 5 minutes. Your answers help them match the show with the best possible advertisers, the ones that will mean the most to you, that'll best match your sensibilities. If you do enter, you are eligible to win a $100 Amazon gift card in their monthly raffle. They promise not to email you. Only if you win will you ever hear from them. So to complete it, just go to www.podsurvey.com/iMore. That's podsurvey.com/iMore. Take the survey, get a chance to win, and help us find Mo-Betta advertising partners. Peter, thank you so much for your time.
As always, Rene, a pleasure. Talk to you next week.
And we have a Kaiju cast coming up for Saturday. Peter and I and Dave Wiskus, Georgia Dow, and Anthony Casella talked Kaiju for an hour and a half. It was awesome.
It was a lot of fun. If you enjoy giant monsters like Godzilla, Mothra, that sort of thing, please tune in and let us know what you think.
Absolutely. You can watch the iMore show live. It is Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. If you can't watch it live, you can always find it on iTunes. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on RSS. If you are here live, though, you can ask us questions. You can be in the chat room. You can find... Peter, did you say where I could find you already? I don't think you did. Where are you on the internet?
On the internet, on Twitter, I'm at Flarg, Flargh, and on iMore, imore.com, all the time.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie, and I'm going to go now eat and sleep something, Peter.
That sounds very fair, Rene. You've earned it.
All right, guys. Have a great week. Thank you so much.